Welcome to the L3 podcast, also known as Love, Lies, and Lifestyles. No living person is exempt from love, the lies, and living a particular lifestyle. From sex to building wealth, this show is solely to entertain, enlighten, and empower. All topics discussed are strictly the opinion of the host and the guests that appear on the show. Here's your host, Dr. K. Hey y'all, I'm so excited. Another week of great topics and great conversations with great people. It's been a long week and I'm tired, just like y'all are. But we still got great stuff to talk about. So let's get started. At this point, the world has seen the public lynching of George Floyd's death and how that became the linchpin for these nationwide protests, including protests in the Amish community, Ireland, South Korea, Pakistan, Syria, all over the world. The mood has been a mix of anger, frustration, and a heightened intolerance for the blood on America's hands that continues to be replenished with the daily systemic racism that is perpetuated in every living space for Black people. I think I echo the sentiments of many people, and in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer when she said, "I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired." I have two special guests joining me today on L3 to talk about the current and historical state of America. I want you to welcome my guest, Pia Johnson, who is a licensed social worker, and Robin Branch, who is the founder of Inside Urban. Welcome to L3.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh man, I'm so excited to have you both. I'm ready to jump in. I have a couple of questions for you all. And then I'll probably, whoever wants to take it first, then you can take that question first. But we'll get some time to go through all of the questions. So my first question is, so we've seen all the comments online about the rioting, looting, and that we should peacefully protest. And we're now starting to see some peaceful protests. But before those peaceful protests with the rioting, I want to hear from you. What are your thoughts around that when people were pushing for a peaceful protest?
Well, I have several thoughts around that. On one hand, I definitely don't condone violence and I don't condone property damage.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's very disturbing that anytime something happens within the Black community and there is some rioting and some looting, we're always told, oh, you need to go about this in a peaceful manner. But they're rioting and these things are going on and people are angry and they feel helpless and hopeless because of violence that was perpetrated against them. Mm-hmm. So why is it that we have to always be the peaceful ones, but yet violence can always be brought upon us? Right. Yes, there has to be a better way for us to voice our concern. But like I said, when you have people that feel helpless, they feel hopeless, there's nothing else they can do, these things keep happening in their community. Mm-hmm. This is what happens. This is exactly what happens. It's like the perfect storm. It's just dynamite.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, on top of, we were already and still are in a pandemic. So you have 40 million people out of work, right? Yes. So the frustration and people trying to figure out how I'm going to feed my family. And then now out here, everybody being at home and witnessing this. I mean, yes. It's just so many hits of trauma and just disrespect. People are at their breaking point.
And truth be told, half of the TVs and the Coach bags and all of that was stolen are probably going to be sold to pay people's light bills, to put food on people's tables with the unemployment rate looking like it is. So like I said, I don't condone violence or property damage or theft, but I do understand why it's happening. And I just wish that others would be a little bit more empathetic and stop telling us stop the violence.
Right.
Start telling the ones who are perpetrating the violence against us to stop the violence.
I mean, this country was built on that. Like, let's be
Oh,
let's be clear,
definitely,
right? This
definitely.
country was
Yes,
built on that. And so when you think about the corporations who took all that money during that whole PPP loan, and they didn't need it, and so then the smaller businesses didn't get it, and people lost jobs behind. I mean, the greed, right? The looting of our bodies, the
yes,
looting of our communities, the looting of our people for 400 years. The
yes,
audacity of you to tell us how we should
exactly.
respond to the frustration and the constant racism that we have to live in every single day, even without the
Yes,
pandemic.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's the amazing, like in this respect, and I'll draw my lines. Like, this is where white people amaze me. And ultimately, to say to a population of people, while we've caused you all sorts of damage and harm historically, we're still going to step in and tell you how to resist our onslaught of damage and harm. This is the only way that we're going to hear you about our damage and harm, is if you do it this way. I think that the peaceful protesting hasn't really yielded much fruit historically, because there was never a threat to the bottom line of the white majority.
Right.
I think a lot of poor communities have recognized that my life doesn't matter much to you. At some point, neither do the lives of your own children to the white majority, the white wealthy majority. I do recognize what does matter to you, and that's your bottom line.
Right.
So I'm going to hurt you where your values are.
Oh,
Like,
preach.
you don't value my life. You don't even value some of your own white colleagues' life.
Right.
I know how much you value that bottom line.
Mhm.
And so as a response, and a lot of times, we want to hear, the cameras will pan to somebody who's looting, and they'll want to hear this highly articulated, response as to why. But we intrinsically understand this is what you value. You value this Coach store.
Right.
You
Yep.
value this Walmart. You value this AutoZone more than you value me. So I'm going to hit you where it hurts, just like you hit me where it hurts for me. I think the amazing thing about that is, now I think there's a certain level of listening that's occurring, because the damage to property has been heightened so much. Police were created around slavery, protection of slavery and property.
Yes.
Yes.
And so now, because that's the police's function, property owners are going crazy, because now my property is being damaged. The thing I really value the most is now being put in harm's way. And so now they have to respond. They at least have to hear it, because it's not happening in one city. Like, this is almost like, according to my elders, this is like 68. Like, it's happening in every major city in the country, and you don't have enough people to deploy to address this issue now.
Yes.
And as much as the president, I was trying to avoid calling him that, but as much as the president wants to say he put the troops on the street, I think we see a wider schism amongst people now more than ever.
Yes.
I think even your military isn't all completely aligned to the behaviors of the commander-in-chief. So I doubt he really has as much weight with that as other presidents may have had in the past.
Right.
So I think we're hearing lots of young people, and I love the fact that there's lots of young people out here making this move, making this voice heard. Lots of young people are basically saying, we don't value the construct as a whole. For Black folks, we're moving out on the issues around Black Americans. For a lot of young white folks, a lot of young Latino folks who are out there fighting as well, they're looking at it from the standpoint of, this whole thing is broken anyway.
Yeah.
This is just our reason. This is the thing we're going to jump on as well, because we also recognize how broken we are.
Yeah, this might be the generation to save us. You're absolutely right, Rock. I mean, I think it's so disrespectful how when I see these comments and you say, oh my gosh, that's a terrible thing what happened to that man, but the looting and rioting needs to stop. I mean, it's so backwards. It's like, oh, but you're not out here preaching for the killings to stop, but the looting should stop. You have insurance. Those items, you can restock and put your items back on that shelf. You cannot reshelf a life.
Yeah, and most of the time, my livelihoods the people who are tweeting that, my livelihood directly or indirectly is connected to that.
Right.
So while I'm not in the Coach store, 3 doors down is the Ferragamo store, and I might work there. Stop looting, because that's going to affect me. If I'm a shareholder, if I'm a part of the establishment who makes money in this exchange of goods and services, if I'm a producer of some level, I'm tweeting, hey, don't burn up stuff because it affects my bottom line.
Right.
So they're looking still with selfish motives. So,
Oh, of course.
you know,
Of course.
with
That's
that, I almost,
absolutely what it is. I mean, a
and so
lot of these, yeah, sorry.
there's a level of applause that has to happen
Hmm.
around the resistance that is brewing right now.
Absolutely. And it needs to get to this point. I mean, I came to tears when I saw the amount of countries. It's about 18 countries now that have set up protests. I mean, when have we ever, I can't recall ever um, in history of when we've had so many countries, South Korea, Pakistan, Syria, right? Protesting for Black Lives Matter. Like, that's huge. And to see that movement happening right now, you know, we start talking about the reckoning. And I really think that this is it. And it needs to happen. We are just so fed up. And we won't take it anymore. We can't take it anymore. We cannot go back once the country opens up to business as usual, right? As Black
Uh,
people for so long, we should have been pooling our resources together.
that,
And we
yeah,
lost sight of that.
I believe, from an educational standpoint, I've always said we'll never go back to school the way we did, right?
Mm.
But, taking a step back from that, if we do this right, and I say we because I absolutely align myself to all the protests that are going on, nothing should be the same again.
Absolutely.
We're almost doing a disservice if we go back to business as usual. Every industry in our country, every organization, every for-profit, nonprofit, our government structure,
Yeah.
nothing should be the same going forward.
You're absolutely right. And it
You should make a point
disheartens,
of it.
it disheartens me when I see teachers online saying like, this isn't our place. This isn't our business. This has nothing to do with education. And I'm like, whoa, this is, you're part of the problem. Let's just be clear.
These are kids in the street tearing up stuff. Like, it absolutely is part of you. You matter so much more because these ain't 40-year-old guys out in the street busting up stuff.
Right.
These are 20-somethings and lower. These are people who are still getting an education.
Yep. You're
And
absolutely right.
We're part of that problem.
Yeah.
And truth be told, those children from a mental health standpoint will be back into your classroom.
Absolutely. It
When
will be
school
your problem.
Exactly. When school does open up, and that will be your problem if we don't start addressing the situation as a whole right now.
Correct.
It definitely will be your problem because these children have been out of school. A lot of these kids, at least in New York City, you have a good amount of kids who are in transitional housing, who are in shelters, who are couch surfing. And those children have had to shelter in. Imagine sheltering in to a New York City shelter in the New York City shelter system.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
Being stuck in a shelter during this pandemic. Imagine the conditions.
Right.
So teachers do and school administrators do need to recognize that these children, not only were they traumatized before this because of homelessness and other things that might have been going on in their lives, now after this,
right,
that experience, what is coming into your classroom? So instead of saying this is not my problem, they need to be trying to figure out how do we help these children from a mental health standpoint coming back into the classrooms.
right.
Yeah, I'd say even to add on to that, teachers have had the luxury of not being in front of these children since March. So, Memorial Day, for the most part, the country's still in school. Imagine what school would have been like for that teacher who wants to wash their hands of the issue. On Monday morning, had little Billy seen that video over the weekend, comes into school on Tuesday morning. Oh, now it's like you might, instead of me breaking a department store window, so teachers better get in line with the fact that, the disservice that we've done young people, we have to start repairing and figuring it out now. So when they do step back in, you might want to start with some ownership and some apologies. Like there are tens of thousands of teachers who should be doing that level of reflection. Let me start with some ownership and some apology because I can recognize, whether I recognize my child specifically on that camera, I have to recognize that these are the children who I've also done some harm to.
Ain't that the truth?
Not just that, 100,000 plus people have died of COVID.
Right.
Those people are aunts, uncles, parents,
Moms, dads, yep.
brothers, sisters, moms, dads, to these same children.
Yep.
They are going to need a lot of support coming back
Yes,
into the classroom and getting back
absolutely.
out into society,
Yeah.
because they have had so much loss. They have lost their social lives. They've lost their communities. They've lost their
Mhm.
loved ones.
Mhm.
100,000 people.
Right. Right. I mean, oh, so you also think about that impact on especially our children of color who not only were you already suffering, right? And I think all children, like if you've lost someone to COVID, regardless of your color of skin, like that is something that everybody has been impacted one way or another, right? But then when you start thinking about our children who are in who have been marginalized, who are not in homes, and then you think about that on top of COVID, and then especially if you are a Black child, like then seeing a Black man right in front of your face being publicly lynched, it was, I mean, think about, it's just too much. It's too much. And what we're going to expect, we're going to expect him to just come in or her to come in class and just sit down and do what you say, right? School is going to have to look a lot different, and your lesson plans ain't going to get it. It's not going to get through for our babies. And so we need to do something different, which takes me to my next question. So what do you think Blacks and allies need to do collectively to shift the tide in America? I'll throw that to Rock first.
Wow. Okay. So Blacks and allies, and it's funny because you know, I'm sure we've been having these conversations in our own pockets for the last week. I'll say, and we've probably been having them before that, you know. But I'll definitely say, like, you know, one of the things I want allies to become abolitionists. You know, and
say that again.
Yeah, allies need to become abolitionists, and the reason why is because an ally, you know, while there will be some, they might stand quietly by the side, and you know, and yeah, you know, I agree with them. You know, an abolitionist has to recognize I'm actually part of the problem, and now I'm going to work strategically and specifically against what has been my own privilege for a really long time. An abolitionist does things like, you know, if this is back in, you know, in the 1800s, an abolitionist goes to the same bar with the Confederate soldiers who talk about, I can't stand this, I can't stand that. But then they've built an additional room in their basement when the runaway slaves need a place to hide.
Right.
And abolitionists walked amongst their own organizations, their own circles, but when it was really time to ride, if you will, they provided opportunity and space for people to get free.
Yes.
Modern day times, abolitionists look something somewhat the same, because some of us need actual physical shelters to be safe, but then others need opportunity. Sometimes an abolitionist is, if you're making money off of my talent and my skill set, how about now we switch that paradigm, and instead of me taking, you know, 30% of the haul, how about you take 30% of the haul?
Right.
And now pay me for my research. And your 30%, if you really want to become an abolitionist, look at that as something you can do for multiple people, right?
Right.
So abolitionists have to now, they're the ones who are deciding to give their resource and their support to Black people for the cause of the betterment of all of us.
Yeah.
Once our situation, our station in life is improved, it's better for our entirety.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And we can talk about that from, you know, from the work that I've done in government. We can talk about how once things are better for the entirety, police money lessens, which means other things, other opportunities grow. If we take $50 million from a police force in one city, that could do that's doggy parks and bistros and all. Like, it's all sorts of things. Like, our entire life gets better.
Right.
We have to recognize that to me, abolitionists do that. The second thing, and I know I'm long-winded, forgive me. The second thing abolitionists have to do is begin to teach their white counterparts. To a large degree, and while, you know, we are widely aware of this term, but racism is not a Black issue.
Hello.
It's a white problem.
Yes.
It's a white people problem.
Yes.
Right? And we have to recognize that a lot of times, for all of the reasons that racism has pushed itself to power, a lot of times white people can't hear it from us.
Right.
They got to hear it from one another.
Oh my gosh.
Like,
I just said this the other day. Yes.
You know what I mean? White folk have to fold the mirror up. They have to sit in front of one another and address one another as,
call each other out.
Issue you have.
Yes.
You know? And now what we can do is support them in their learning. But we've been teaching them. If you go back to slavery, we've been taking care of their babies. We've been raising white America since white America.
Yes.
Right? We're the people who raised America. So at some point, we have to be able to take our hands off the wheel and say, look,
Yep.
and that's in a sense what's happening now. We've
Mhm.
decided not to sit in all the little boxes and places you've made for us
Yep.
because they don't fit. And this is what happens when black people take their hands off the wheel.
Yes.
We're going to let this whole thing do
Unravel.
what it does naturally.
Mhm.
Because and I've said this forever, and now I'm going to step off the soapbox with this final statement.
It's
But at the
okay.
end of the day, I've always said, black people are the roots of America.
Mhm.
That's why we'll never go anywhere. There's
Absolutely.
no possible way to eradicate black people from America.
Right.
Then it dies, right?
Right.
So
They've
so here we
tried.
are.
They've tried and
Yeah.
they don't succeed.
From
All they did was
16,
plant
19, they've been
seeds.
trying. They've been trying.
Right.
At the end
Right.
of the day, I almost dare that outcome because that is cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Exactly. Totally with you on that. And you're absolutely right. And I love how I'm seeing so many Black people quit their jobs, right? And it's like people who have been
It's
sitting in
real.
powerful positions are like, I'm done. I'm sick of this racism. This is what I've witnessed. I'm done, and walking away. And we are now realizing like this is the time for us to truly listen to one another and start to rebuild our own. Black people
Yep.
spend more money than any other group of people.
Yeah.
If we stop patronizing these businesses who do not have any respect and love for us, why are we still patronizing their business when we can patronize our own? We can do our, like, I mean, it's just when I look at the nail salons, right? Like where we're going to go get our nails done at, like we can do that. The
Yes,
only
we
thing
can.
we haven't given up is who going to do our hair. Let's be honest with that, right? Like we haven't given that part up, right? But even
Exactly
so,
right.
like we can have our own beauty supply stores, right? We can get all those things, but why do we continuously run out to support other businesses? That needs to stop. And when we come back together and pool our resources, I mean, people are just really scared of our strength. That's what it is, the power that we hold when we come together. And you're right, Rock, like we take our hands off the wheel and we're like, we're done, and we're going to watch it all fall apart. Right. I saw somebody
Very
post
different.
something the other day that says, if you kill us all, where you going to get all of your, it says something like, if you kill us all, where will you get all of your talent from, or all of your ideas from, something along those
Yeah.
lines. And I was like, that's so true. Right. It's so true. We have built this country and we're tired. We're tired.
Definitely. Definitely.
Pia, what are your thoughts? What do you think Blacks and allies need to do collectively to shift the tide in America?
I totally agree with what Rock said, 2000%. But I also feel that the power is in the vote, right?
Mm.
And I remember being a little girl, and my grandmother, she would always stress. My grandmother would vote for the Block Association. It could be, you know, it didn't matter what it was. My grandmother was going down those 4 flights of steps,
Mm-hmm.
walking to the voting poll and casting her vote, no matter what the weather was, no matter how sick she was, whatever. We need to make sure we vote locally, not just nationally, and get out there in droves, because
Yes.
that is one way we ended up in this situation. That's how
Yes.
45 got in.
Yes.
We didn't vote. And even when
Over
we
100,000 Black people did not vote. I mean, what the heck?
Exactly. And even when we did come out for Barack Obama, we dropped the ball with the House and the Senate.
Yes, we did.
Okay? And I'm hoping that we see how important it is for us to control both the House and the Senate, as well as the person sitting in that House.
Yeah.
It is extremely important that we come out and we make our voices heard. That way, we'll have police chiefs that listen to us. We'll have local legislators that listen to us. We'll have people on a national level that listen to us. And we can appoint judges, because that is what Trump is doing right now. He is appointing conservative judges, and we don't have our eye on that.
Serve lifetime positions.
Exactly, that serve lifetime positions. We do not have our eye on that. So, you know, even though we have our eyes on, you know, the high court, what about the lower court? What about the courts that are sentencing, you know, our Black and brown people to 25 years to life for you know, petty crimes and nonviolent crimes? You know, we have to vote, because that is how we will control what happens moving forward after the marching stops.
Yes, you're so right. What is the act? So I've always said, and I've been to protests before, and I've always said, like, what is the action? So it is not okay. We take to the street for a couple of days and then we go back to business as usual.
Exactly.
This one has been the most pronounced protest because how it sparked global outrage in people and global alliances to say like, oh, this is ridiculous. This is too much now. The world was disgusted with that, right? And I think anybody with a soul can admit that. And you're absolutely right. Now it's the action. A lot of people don't understand that our local politicians are much more actually powerful than who sits in the presidency. It's not just who sits in the presidency. Yes, that's a powerful position to sit in, but your local politicians are the more powerful seats. So when you're voting for your president, you're voting for your local politician as well. And most people don't know who that is, right? So it's understanding like who are those people sitting in those seats in your local jurisdiction? What do they stand for, right? Are you showing up at their office? Are you calling their office? Oh, they hate these phone calls. Ring the phones off the hook.
Exactly.
Because someone is sitting there to ask the answer. Ring the phone off the hook. You have to write those letters. Yeah.
You got to let them know you're a registered voter. You got to let them know if you're going to remember their decision on this topic when up for re-election.
Absolutely. And there's power in voting.
Police union should be as strong as they are and have such a strong hold on every major city. There's no reason why that police union should be like that. We need to be out there and going after those people, those individuals, those organizations, right? Because the PBA, they dictate what cops do. They not the mayor. It's the police union that dictates that. So why is it that I know in New York it's always a Patrick O'Reilly or O'Hara or someone in that position that's justifying killings of Eric Gardner and other black men in New York? Why haven't I seen a Johnson, Jones, or Smith in that?
Right. Jenkins or Williams.
Hello.
Exactly. Freeman.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And this is why we have to educate the masses, right? And I've always said that when God gives you a gift, your responsibility is to share it and not hoard it. Yes. And the gift that he's given the three of us, and there are many other people like us out there, is the gift of the knowledge, the resources, and not being able to sit in this place of still being mentally enslaved. Many of our people are still mentally enslaved. And so now when you get out, it is your responsibility, right? It is incumbent upon us to go back for our people and educate them. And so when I hear people say my vote don't count, I say, this is what they want you to believe, because if your vote didn't count, they wouldn't have all these laws and statutes in place preventing you from voting.
Yes.
Right? Like your vote absolutely counts. And the worst thing a person can do is say, well, I don't like this candidate and I don't like that candidate, so I'm not going to vote because I feel like if I voted, I supported them. The worst thing you can do is not vote, but then sit back and complain.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So, which then makes me think about going back to our schools and our children. It's going to be rough come August and September. And so many of our Black and brown students will be returning to schools in a couple months. And given the open wound that has never closed in our community, or in this country rather, with the repeated hits of trauma, how do educators move forward? I'll throw that to Rock first.
Well, yeah, I think it's, to me, it really starts with, and I'll use a very quick example of my time as a principal. I recognized I had the weight to bear of making connections and strong relationships with the community.
Yeah.
And the reason why I stepped into that is because I've always used the analogy of credit. Right. We understand credit in America. If you have bad credit, they don't work with you. No one wants to deal with you. It's hard to get support. It's hard to get a loan. And one good payment on time does not make your credit score go up. Right. It's consistent payments over time that rise your score. What's America's credit score with Black people?
Right.
If you use that analogy, right?
The negative.
And so, exactly. And so coming into agency as a principal, I worked in an agency which represents government. So I have to recognize that there's probably a low credit score that I have with my Black community just because I'm coming in representing agency / government. My job was to make consistent payments over time to restore some level of trust with the community, so then they want to engage me and work with me and extend me some credit and grace in the work
Right.
of educating them. I use that analogy because I think schools have to recognize that they're coming back to systems that, if they've done any reflection over the last several months, that are broken,
Right.
that have not served. I mean, here in Washington, D.C., 37% of African American and Latino boys graduate on time. 37%. That means my black son at 12 only has a 37% likelihood of graduating on time just because he's a black boy, regardless of the fact that he came from two educated parents who have, 3 and 4 degrees and who work the way we do and who are in the education field. By nature of his skin tone, he only has a 30% chance, 37% likelihood of graduating on time.
Wow.
You have
How
to
are we
either-
not outraged by that? That's what that's what gets
Exactly.
me and has me in a place of being livid. How are we in the black community not outraged by that? And you just said something so powerful, Rock, when you said when you stepped in that principal seat, you realized that you were coming in representing the agency. And so what was your credit score with the black community? Not coming in with the mindset, well, I'm black, I look like them,
Right.
I've been through this, I know what this is. Where sometimes we come across that. Right. You and I,
Absolutely.
we've been in, I've lost count in how many schools, close to 1,000 schools at this point that I've been in. And to hear people, especially our own, with this flippant approach of, I know these kids, I was these kids. Well, then we should expect and more of you because you're claiming you were these kids and you know these kids. How dare you sit in that place of complacency and be okay with the status quo?
School districts have to answer, I think, 2 or 3 very specific questions. The first one is, do you believe that black children have a genetic predisposition to failure? Right? And I think it's a yes or no question. Right? And then depending on that answer, quite frankly, you then have to ask a second question, which is, were you ignorant of what's needed to happen to serve black and brown children well, or were you complicit in the crime?
Right.
Because if we recognize that it's not a genetic predisposition, that means we either didn't know or didn't care to serve these children right.
Exactly.
I think those 3 questions are what every school district does reflect. Do your homework now.
Yeah.
Because these are hard questions that don't take a long time to unearth. But you have to unearth it to begin to work so that young people can get in these buildings and feel differently, because they're going to take all this heat from the summer when they still going home and they're still locked into a certain degree. All that energy is going somewhere. Let a school building open in August, and someone not be prepared to deal with all that angst.
Yes.
I think I'll give it to the therapist here about what happens when that angst isn't addressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, right now, I see adults and they are going through a lot of depression and anxiety. So I can only imagine what children are going through. And having been in the past a school social worker and also a school mental health consultant, right? I've seen kind of both sides of the coin. And I will say that schools have to start utilizing school social workers and school counselors differently.
Yeah.
Right? Instead of utilizing us for lunch duty and bathroom duty, they need to use us in a way in which we reach not just the children but the parents. So when I was a school social worker, you don't know how many calls I would make to parents just saying your child did well in school today, and the parents would say, you know what, Pia, I only get calls telling me how poorly he did. That's all that school level ever does. I don't even pick up the phone when the school calls. So when you say how, we should be outraged, we should be, but parents are so disengaged because of how the schools communicate with them that they don't even pick up the phone when they see the school is calling. They won't pick up the phone.
Right.
They will not. So we really need to not just engage the children, engage the parents.
Yes.
I ran groups after school. After school, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, I'd stay and run groups for parents.
Right.
Groups to address their mental health. Because if the parents aren't well, the children aren't going to be well.
Exactly.
They don't know how to recognize signs and symptoms in their children. Then, their children will fall by the wayside. They
Yeah.
need to know about IEPs. They need to know what kind of counseling their children
Mhm.
are getting in school. So I think the administration has to learn how to engage with
Mhm.
parents and students much better. They have to do a better job of that, and
Yeah.
hire, quite frankly, more mental health professionals coming back to
Absolutely.
this school year. We need to have people at the door ready to evaluate
Yes.
children, sitting in classrooms, doing observations, right?
And I'm going to tell you, it's not just the children who need to be evaluated.
No, it's not just the children. It's not. It's the staff also.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
as a school mental health consultant, I would have workshops for staff
Right.
members, and you probably wouldn't be surprised at some of the things these people would say. These
Oh,
teachers.
yes. As a national consultant, I mean, it's the things that come out of the adults' mouth. Someone posted on Facebook, for example, the other day, and said they pretty much, I don't remember it verbatim, so I'll paraphrase, but what the person said was they were pretty much in support of officers in schools, right? Like, and so someone first posted and said, police officers have no business in schools. NYPD needs to pull that funding. De Blasio needs to do something different, pull that funding, and take cops out of schools. Someone responds and was like, oh, you don't know these kids. They will be off the hook if we weren't in these schools. And I normally don't respond to these things because I just try not to get into those kind of conversations because it tells me a lot about your mindset. But when I get called to respond to certain people, I respond because there was a certain level of ignorance there. And I responded to the person and I said, oh, another person then responded and said, they don't know. They haven't been in these schools. I said, I've been all over the country. And I'm pretty clear you haven't left your school building.
Mhm.
I've been all over the country. I've been in damn well 1,000 schools. All right. I have chronicles and stories of the things that adults say that incite children, antagonize, and provoke kids. So by the time it gets to you, the adult already riled that child up, and now you're coming in to clean it up. And so what I said to the person is that schools, educators need more training. Parents need better resources. They need to be engaged. And the schools have no business having police in schools. We already see the outcome of having police in schools. They're in schools with children that look like the three of us.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And then we know the pipeline that has been set up for those children. It's no accident that the graduation rate in DC is at 37% for Black children. That is not by accident. That is intentionally designed. And so when I see those kind of comments, and it just tells me there's a lack of education on that person's behalf, that in their mind, and I said to the person that, well, if you're the adult and the children are displaying this behavior, when will you change your behavior so that the children will change theirs?
I say it all the time. It's a matter of children show childlike behavior. They're being
Yes.
childish.
Right.
That's what immaturity looks like.
Right.
So if someone's allowed to be less mature in this moment, it is the
It's
child.
the child, right?
And so and when I talk to my staff about it, it will go over their head or in one ear out the other. I think the craziest looks I ever got from adults in my building was when there'd be a conflict between an adult and a student, and they'd see me turn to the child and say, "Explain to me what happened."
Right.
A child has a voice in this building. Well, as opposed to what? Right? Like, as a matter of fact, this is the most important voice in the building. And if we break it down to pure money, this is why you're here.
Hello.
This is what pays your rent. This is what feeds your baby at home.
Right.
So you should probably defer to if we look at it like a business, this is your client. Is your client leaving here with a product they're happy with?
Exactly.
But if they're not, you need to fix the product.
Yes.
But in all fairness, I've sat through teacher training, new teacher training, and it does not prepare them for exactly for the things that these children go through, right? It only prepares them to teach children how to read and write, right? But they go into the classroom, and before you can teach a child anything, they have to be engaged. They have to be mentally okay, right? Because if they're coming from a home that there was domestic violence and they had to go to a shelter the night before, which happens all the time. I mean, I was in schools. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And the next day they're coming to school after being up all night in the intake center, you know, at the shelter.
And you yelling at them, pick your head up, complete my
Pick your head up.
Yeah.
Exactly. What do you mean you don't have a pencil? Take that hoodie off. I mean, the teachers are not properly prepared to go into these classrooms and be empathetic and understand what's going on with these children. So, I mean, and so I think looking at it also from the perspective of training for these teachers.
100%. And I'm all for Pia. Yes, you hit that nail on the head. And that's why I'm so passionate about overhauling teacher preparation programs, because they do not prepare teachers. I think about when I went through my program and I was like, what is this? You know, I stepped into the classroom and I never forget the AP came to my room and said, okay, toss out all your books because everything you learned in school, it will not be applicable here. And I was like, what? And she was like, you will find out everything you read does not help. Right. And I was like, well, what have I got myself into? And so you're right. They are woefully underprepared when they step into classrooms. And, you know, and I have such a strong heart for educators, because this is the most difficult career you'll ever have in your life. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. And so we need to make sure that our teachers have the resources that they need and that they also have help, because we have adults coming in who have unresolved issues in their life, and we expect them to be whole and complete, standing in front of children who also are dealing with, you know, the hot word has been trauma in education, right? Who has been dealing with trauma. And then we look at them and wonder why they're not responding appropriately, but they never got the help. So we definitely need to provide help, both not to just the children and their families, but to the educators standing in front of them. Right? Yes. Like leadership programs need to be overhauled. Teacher prep programs need to be overhauled. I mean, we need to look at the company's curriculum is coming from, right? Is it truly diverse and representative of the children where these books and resources are being shipped to? I mean, there's so many issues in education. And even though we all know it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, we just need to just burn it down. We just need to burn it down and start all over at this point.
A lot of teachers think they're walking in the schools, especially the schools that require the most love, as we like to say. A lot of them think they're walking in to a school where I'm working on, you know, dismantling the bad teaching that happened the year before, which is why Billy's 2 years. I feel your heart, but no, right? If we recognize instead that what you're doing is you're coming into a field where you have to begin to realize I'm trying to dismantle an oppressive system overall. I'm working in here to make sure this young person sees value and worth and success that looks like them and give them opportunity to have voice and advocacy. Because to me, like all the other things, like they become as a byproduct, you'll learn how to write that essay well. You'll learn how to, you know, do that math problem well. You'll learn great elements of history, both yours and for people who don't look like you. If you walk in saying, I'm teaching a child how to become a strong, self-advocating, stand on 2 feet adult, all the other stuff will fall into place as a byproduct if you teach the child and not the subject.
Yes.
Right? And while it's a little cliche, we've never really gotten to what dismantling oppressive systems look like at the teacher prep level. And once we do that, I think they walk in the door saying, because I've had a whole bunch of young white teachers who wanted to be Michelle Pfeiffer or Hilary Swank, like they came in wanting to be that person, right?
Right.
And it was only after they realized, hey, I completely walked in with an assumption of who my child was and also of what my job was. I want to teach little Jose how to read again. Nah. Treat Jose like a young man who's trying to develop his identity and be strong in himself.
Right.
Other stuff will happen.
Oh man.
It's relationship building. You can't just walk in and bulldoze your way through and think that these children and the parents, because if you don't have the parents buy-in, you're not going to have the children. Because what do you think when that child goes home, that parent is, well, this teacher that, and the kids hear this. You have to get the parents. Right. And so I know I used to organize events at my schools also that were like meet and greet. So the parents could come up to the schools. I would ask the teachers if they could stay. Some of the teachers would stay. Some of them, as soon as their time is up, they're out. You know, and when I was growing up, my teachers lived in my community.
Yes.
Right? I would see my teachers at the grocery store. My parents would see the teachers at the grocery store. They knew the teachers. It's not like that now. And so how do we get these parents and teachers to come together, to know each other? So now when I call as a teacher, that parent picks up. Now when I say, you know, this happened in the classroom, the parent isn't, well, what did you do?
Right.
Because there's no trust there. There's no trust between the system, the schools, and the parents. There's no trust there.
And that's why parents now question. When we all went to school, parents didn't question. If that teacher said something, you believed it. You're right. The teachers lived in our community. And it was different. Right. Even the education was different. And now, because that trust is broken, a majority of teachers don't live in the communities they're teaching in. There's no relationship. And so now it becomes, well, what did you do? You know, my child said, you said and did blank. And I got to be honest with you. I've witnessed a lot of that on the adult end, right? Where I've literally witnessed adults provoke children and then lie about it. And now this child is facing suspension, expulsion, and the adults set this whole thing up. And it's mind boggling, because the way the system is designed, it's the child takes the fall for it. They take the fall for the misguidance of adults. They take the fall because of the lack of clarity from adults, because of the unpreparedness of the adults. The burden consistently falls on the child, and we have to change that.
And because there's no relationship with that adult.
Yes.
If you have a relationship with that child, you have empathy for that child.
Yes.
You understand what's going on. You know the parents, you know what's going on. You will not provoke them. You will not do harm. You will not do anything. Because you look at that child as one of your own, right? Which we expect when we send our children to school. In that classroom, the people who are dealing with that child in that school building, they look at your child the way they would look at theirs, and they would treat them the way they would treat theirs.
Exactly.
But if there's no relationship, they don't.
Right. And that trust and respect
and in that
is
relationship
gone.
paradigm, one of the things the adult has to do is recognize you are of service to that child in that
Yes. Yes.
And so similar, and lots of times similar to that of police officers, like you don't recognize you're walking in to be of service to people. A lot of our teachers walk in, they're cops without badges and guns sometimes. I want to walk in, I want to show control and strength. And it's like, hey, you're still here in service to someone. And if we and those points are often missed, which is why that school prison pipeline is so real, because teachers walk in like cops. You almost don't need school resource officers.
Exactly.
You have terrible adults behaving like they're here for law and order.
Yes, you're absolutely Rock. I have always said, and I wrote an article, I think about 2 years ago, and I mentioned in the article that a lot of our schools are designed like prisons, right? The students are the inmates, the teachers are the correction officers, and the principals are the wardens. Right. And it's just the whole makeup of the school from the time you enter it, going through the metal detectors, how our kids are treated, especially when you look in New York City, like the bars all over the windows. I mean, it's already or the buildings we've been in. And it's like, put your hands behind your back when you walk down the hall. And I'm just like, this is a school. These babies are 5. Like, what are you doing?
You have them walking the line, walking that line, just like in prison.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I just want to ask you all, as we start to wrap up, what are 2 things you think schools should prepare for as teachers are going to come back, school leaders are coming back, and those babies are coming back? What are the first 2 things you think they need to prepare for?
I think from my perspective, 2 things are the biggest thing, mental health crisis. Teachers and students, they're going to have to observe the adults in the building, as well as address the issues that the children will be returning, the trauma that they're going to see, and in the parents. Right. Because everybody has to be on one team. The biggest thing is to recognize When a teacher is starting to decompensate, right,
Yes.
and starting to kind of go off the rails, if they're suffering from anxiety, depression,
Mhm.
and if they're projecting that onto the children that are in the building, right,
Right.
and also the trauma that the children will be coming back into.
Mhm.
It's going to be rough. It's going to be really rough. There will be no learning in that building
Right.
if we don't address mental health issues in that building.
Yeah.
No learning.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. I think about I actually someone asked me to do something for some teachers coming in, and I said, well, we need to definitely look at the mental health crisis. Look at these are things you can do before kids even come back to school, and
Yes.
what's important for them to start setting those things up before kids, because then it allows teachers to get in a space of, when you find out these are the things kids need, are you prepared to deliver? And if
Exactly.
not, you have to step down.
Yeah.
Cannot
Yeah.
come in there and think you just gonna wing it. These kids
No.
have way more energy than us. They will wear you out.
And they're also highly socially intuitive, right? Like, and
Yeah.
that's the part that makes it a keen sense of what isn't fair. They can
Mhm.
see it coming a
Oh,
mile away.
mhm.
High social intuition, and you
Yes,
try to pull a fast one on them, like it's a sign of disrespect,
it is.
It is.
and it gets addressed as if this is a sign of disrespect, you know.
Yes, yes. So what advice do you have, Rock?
Well, my one was going to be what Peter just said around mental health, but my other one is this. Howard University released a study where they talked about the most experienced and the most credentialed employees in urban school settings are black men, followed by black women, then white women, in
Mm,
addition fourth to white men. But for urban school leadership, it's the exact inverse. White men,
mm,
hold position, followed by white women, then black women, then a distant fourth of black men.
mm.
So the people who are least credentialed and least informed about urban school education run most of the school districts.
Yep.
Then ultimately their C-suite are filled with their colleagues, their buddies,
Yes.
my grad school friend, my teacher prep program buddy. So now you're all C-suiters together. Still, if you're A-alikes, you're disconnected from
Yep.
that population. School districts have to open up and get more equity and diversity in their C-suite.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean get the principal who held his school like an iron vice and make him the security head.
Right.
We need to be in places like finance, human resources, teacher prep. We need to be in C-suite positions making decisions on who gets in front of our children and what kind of
Right.
resources come to our children. More school districts than not, as you dig into people who've climbed up the ladder, they
Mhm.
predominantly come from your most successful schools in the district. That's how they climb the
Yes.
ladder. Most of those successful schools have a tax bracket affiliated with it.
Yep.
The least successful schools also have a tax bracket affiliated with it.
Exactly.
And our leaders in those schools don't always rise up in central office
Right.
because they're considered not successful.
Right.
That's how we keep the problem contained.
Yeah.
That's how we continue to have poor schools providing poor education opportunities, because there's a disconnect between what the chancellor or the school superintendent knows and what the
Mhm.
reality is on the ground. You
Mhm.
only get better information when you open that up and have people who come from every walk of life and
Right.
every school. As a matter of fact, the pendulum's so swung, you might now have to just bring it all the way back over here and say, let me get a whole bunch
Yeah.
of folks who come out of my toughest schools to help me make decisions on how to serve those schools.
Yes.
Rock, I think one of the most powerful things I've learned from you was when you were sharing with me about when you were a principal and y'all lost 59 kids.
Yeah, 56. Yeah, over my time as
56.
principal, I buried 56 children. Yeah.
56 children.
Yeah.
Like, but what the people sitting up there in the C-suite who are so disconnected would say is, oh, they're not making any progress over there. I haven't seen these NAEP scores move along. But for y'all, progress was, we're trying to save kids' lives. We're not trying to have 56.
Exactly.
We're trying to get this number down as much as we can. The last thing on our mind is academics right now, when we need to put other measures in place to provide a safe space for these children. So you're absolutely right. It's so disconnected.
You get so over that time, while we lost 56 children, we had 27-point gains academically, right? And it's almost like we could have had 60, 70-point gains if we didn't have to make sure that we have dog abatement every morning, where the police run dogs outside the building because kids literally hide guns in bushes because the armor they have to wear out in the community, like
Mhm.
I'm not telling them to take that armor off, because just to get here every morning, you need that armor. Like
Right.
I am not in those places and spaces you leave school to go to. So I'm not going to tell
Mm.
you by any means to take that armor off. But
Right.
I do want to make school a place where you feel comfortable taking that armor off and just become a kid, which meant
Mhm.
every morning there's a weapon abatement crew running around the outside of the building
Mm.
where kids stash their armor, if you will, to
Wow.
prepare for their walk home. And so once we have to do things that children to address things children shouldn't have to live with,
Yeah.
that's when we're doing the wrong work, right? Like to
Yeah.
me, the work is if you can allow a child to be developmentally appropriate in their age and give
Mm.
them all the things they need for that, versus having to walk the life. The kid who walks from their house to my school was always the toughest kid in the city, because
Yeah.
it's a walk my upper northwest affluent brothers and sisters never had to walk and probably couldn't if they had to.
Right.
Right. So just starting from that position, don't talk to me about grit. My kids make this walk every day.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Like don't talk to me about grit. Like don't talk to me about what it's like when I got kids whose bellies touching their back for real. So
Mm.
those are the kind of things that school districts have to become, and now's the time to attack it. They have to become more aware, but this is now the pressure that every industry's feeling around what's happening in our world today. This is the time to bust that wide open. This
Yeah.
is absolutely the time. And so my work with every school district is to really get them to understand that these are not requests, these are not conversations. This is a demand. And
Yes.
Frederick Douglass said, "Power conceives nothing without demand."
Yes. Right.
Yeah, I also think that schools should form linkages and partnerships with outside organizations,
Mhm.
community-based organizations,
Mhm.
right? So they can send in mentors, they can have develop these programs, and
Yeah,
those children who need extra support, they
Yeah.
can refer them to a mental health some place where they can address some mental health struggles, right? And have a referral based system. So, as a social worker, if I refer a child or a family to an outside organization, a community based organization, like I can follow up, right?
Right.
Call and make sure that the parent come in.
Mhm.
Is the child getting these services? What are the barriers, right? I can follow up with the parent. Oh, Billy didn't go to his appointment. Are there barriers? Do you need Metro
right.
cards? Like, what is going on? So not just referring them, but following up on the referrals, which is where a
Yes.
lot of times the bridge is broken.
Yep.
Mhm.
You're absolutely right. Thank
That's
you
right.
so much. You both have provided so much insight, as I knew you would. I really enjoyed this conversation. I can engage in these conversations all day, every day. So I'm glad to have been able to do it with you both today. And I'm sure the listeners would truly find this valuable and helpful for them as well. Brother Rock, Pia, um, listen, my words can't express how grateful I am for you to be here today. Thank you both.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
me.
Appreciate you.
Absolutely. All
All
right. Take
right.
care. Educators have a responsibility to challenge the oppressive structures that exist in our schools and communities. We cannot turn a blind eye to the injustice that our children are facing every single day. Your silence is just as much of an injustice as the hideous events that play over and over in the Black community. Our students need you. Thank you for joining me and my guest today on L3. Hope you tune in again next week, same place, same time. Remember, love yourself and love each other. Peace.